We bring in the studio this morning one of the gay rights activists, Mr. Should I call you Mr? Sure. Pepe Julian Onzima. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for
Good
having
morning.
me. Morning to you.
Why are you gay?
Who says I'm gay?
You are gay.
Oh my God! Wow!
You are a transgender.
What shows that I'm gay?
You are a transgender, and
Yes,
you're a
I am.
gay rights activist and an outspoken lesbian, homosexual. How can I describe you? Now,
A few moments later.
we're looking at the raging debate. You're a gay rights activist. Why should someone be gay? You're having a girlfriend.
Yes.
Do you perform the natural obligations?
I'm not sexually active right now.
So what are
By
you doing with
choice.
this lady?
By choice.
By choice.
Yeah. I've just not. I've chosen not to engage.
Doesn't that make you gay?
What do you mean? Doesn't that make me gay? I am male and attracted to a female.
So who is gay?
I'm gay.
Hey, what's up, Lyceans, and welcome to another EAPP lesson. For this lesson, we'll be talking about how to prepare and implement your research instruments. Now, in your research classes, your research instrument is a tool that we use to gather data on a specific topic or a specific interest or research question that we are working on. Now, when you're conducting a research, you need to prepare and implement the appropriate instrument to gather the data you need. Okay? Now, when you prepare an instrument, you must ensure that it is valid and very reliable. So for today, we'll be talking those things, and then how you would be preparing or implementing your research instruments properly. Let's get started. Now, with a research, there's actually three types of research instrument. We have the survey. Oh, sorry, three. I think it was four surveys, interview, a questionnaire, observation, and experimentation. Sorry, it's five. So that's survey, interview, questionnaire, your observation, and the experimentation. Now let's start with the survey. With the survey, we have three types of surveys. We have what we call the recall, recognition, and open-ended. With recall, it is a type of question that you ask for specific information, such as, let's say, for example, years of service, the age of the respondent, or the address of the respondent. With the recognition, this type of question, on the other hand, asks for a response to a specific question, where options are given, such as in the case of multiple choices, or yes or no questions, or a rating scale format, perhaps. With the open-ended, it elicits brief explanation or impressions from the respondent. So let's say, for example, questions like, if you're asking for their opinions, or you're asking for their or specific information that you need in order to fulfill your research study. Now, the guidelines before anything else is that first, when you're doing a survey, you introduce yourself and the purpose of the survey. Now, it will make it less sketchy, mainly because you need to state it in black and white so that your respondents will be able to understand why he or she is doing your survey. Second one, do not make it uncomfortable for the respondent. Let's say, for example, you want this particular respondent to do your survey, and so since you don't want to make it uncomfortable for the respondent, we simply don't force the respondent to do our surveys. Or let's say, for example, the respondent already agreed to do our survey. Let us not disturb him or her while doing our survey or ask any more questions, since we are only talking about a survey. Thirdly, do not force a respondent to do anything or anything else. Okay. Number 4, make respondent anonymous when necessary. So let's say, for example, they don't want to write their names, then so be it. It's fine. And then lastly, always thank the respondent for their commitment to do your survey. So that is actually the general guidelines for doing a survey. Okay, it doesn't matter what kind of survey you're giving to the respondent, may it be recall, recognition, or open-ended, as long as you were able to do it in a very um, open way, meaning you introduce yourself and the purpose of the survey, you didn't make it uncomfortable for the respondent, and you thank the respondent for their commitment to do your survey. So that's general guidelines for a survey. The next one is an interview. Now, an interview is also a research instrument that allows the researcher to qualitatively gather data. In an interview, there are 4 parts. First, the pre-interview stage, and then second, the warm-up stage. Thirdly, the main interview stage, and fourthly, the closing stage. Now, the pre-interview stage, it is when the interview guide is prepared and the respondents are identified and contacted. So let's say, for example, you introduce yourselves, you introduce the purpose of the interview, and let's say, for example, it was by invitation sort of interview. You gave the summary of what you are doing to the respondent about the interview. So that's the pre-interview stage. The warm-up stage is actually an initial part of the interview, wherein questions that will make respondents more at ease are asked. Let's say, for example, how are you doing? How do you feel today? Those kinds of warm-up interview stage, just to give the respondent a sense that um, it is a safe place where you are talking, and the interview is non-threatening. And the main interview stage is where you'll be asking your questions. Let's say, for example, um, you would like to interview the respondent using questions from your research study, or based on the research question in your research study. So that's your main interview stage. The closing stage is when the questions are asked to wind down. Of course, you don't just abruptly end the interview stage with a thank you and goodbye. No, of course you ask also um, certain questions to ease the pressure of the respondent. Um, Sometimes the closing stage is not about just asking questions to ease the pressure of the respondent. We also tend to talk about how we relate to their particular situation or whatnot, so that the interviewee or the respondent will be able to recognize that as an interviewer, we did take them into consideration. So those are the stages or the parts of the interview. Now, the general guideline. Firstly, you should arrange your questions logically. Now, when you arrange your questions logically, you arrange your questions, let's say, by stages. So you have your warm-up questions, you have your main interview questions, and your closing script or closing questions. Um, you can also arrange your questions based on the difficulty, or the, how do we say that, the seriousness of the questions. Second one, introduce yourself and the purpose. Okay. Now, if this was, let's say, for example, by invitation, of course, guidelines 1 and 2 will be indicated sa invitation. Third one, have a warm-up stage and adjust your language to the respondent. So let's say, for example, the language that the respondent was using was Tagalog, edi syempre magtatagalog ka din. If Bisaya, of course magbisaya sad ka. Dili ta mag-English kay kuha na siya kanang magiro. If the respondent would respond to you in English, then you would respond to the respondent in English as well. Okay. um, let's say, for example, you are interviewing a foreign respondent, and that particular foreign respondent um, doesn't seem to have a good grasp with the English language. So, what do? Of course, you adjust. You try to understand your respondent by I would say this is a particular strategy, filling in the blanks. Of course, with foreign respondents that don't actually have a good grasp with English, they would try to talk to you in a very stuttery way or in a very Carabao English way. So, since they're talking like that, of course, it is not necessary for you as an interviewer to talk to your respondent like how he or she is talking. Of course, you'll be talking in a fluent form of the English language so that you'll be able to understand the respondent and his or her response to your questions. So you adjust your language. Don't make your words very difficult to understand. Just make them easy to understand if the respondent wasn't able to understand it firsthand. Also, you don't insult your respondents with your words. As you've probably seen sa intro video natin, the interviewer was somehow insulting the respondent with asking why are you gay, those kinds of things. Okay, so we adjust our language. Fourth guideline, make the interview length reasonable. Okay, it shouldn't be so short or too long. Just reasonable. Maybe let's say for a very serious interview, let's say 30 minutes is okay. For a quick interview, let's say 5 to 10 minutes is fine. So make it reasonable. Don't bore your respondent to death. Okay. Now, number 5, record the interview. Let the interviewee know first. Okay. Now, when you are recording your interview, you can either record your interview using video, visual, or audio, or just writing it on a piece of paper or on a notebook. Now, always ask permission to your respondent. Why? Mainly because you need to state why you need to record if you're recording in audio or video format. If they agree, then record. But if they don't agree, ask permission if you can at least write their responses. Okay, that's how you interview. Don't let them write their own responses, okay? Because it will be very insulting to the respondent. Lastly, always thank the respondent for committing to the interview under short notice or under whatever circumstance that the respondent was facing. Okay, so that's the interview part. Again, arrange your questions. The interview should have 4 parts: the pre-interview, warm up, the main interview stage, and the closing stage. All right. So that's how you do the interview. Next is a very common research instrument we call questionnaire. Now, the difference with a questionnaire and a survey is that a questionnaire is more quantifiable. With surveys, yeah, sure, you can quantify the survey, but it it depends on what your research study needs. But with a survey, it just gives a very specific um, information. With questionnaire, um, there are written questions and written written questions for specific information that you need. So let's say, for example, responses in a questionnaire are usually um, identification type. So with a questionnaire, your respondent will have the freedom to, let's say, ask you or um, have a clarification sa questionnaire. With a survey, it's normally black and white. Let's say, for example, um, in a survey, rate 1 to 5 if McDonald's is good, so just rate them. It doesn't really necessarily give or it doesn't necessarily express the respondent's opinion properly. It's very objective. With questionnaires, although it is very objective, it is somehow a bit relaxed or what is the term? Lenient in a way. Okay, now with the questionnaire, there are four parts: the personal information section, the basic questions section, the main question section, and the open-ended questions section. Now, the personal information section, it includes the name. You can also don't write the name if you would um, if the respondent would like to make himself or herself anonymous. It includes the name, the age, the date of birth, address, educational backgrounds, personal information, basically. With basic question section, it serves two purposes. The first purpose is to establish that the person you're asking is the right person for the study. The second purpose um, is to establish rapport with interviewees or with the respondents. Okay. The main question section is where you directly ask questions related to your research study. It is ideal also to have multiple questions for each specific research question. So let's say, for example, you have roughly three research questions, and therefore you need to write at least five questions in multiple choices format per research question, making it 15 questions sa inyong questionnaire. The open-ended question section, it asks for a brief explanation or response to an open-ended question. So let's say, for example, um, you were handing out questionnaires about customer satisfaction. So sometimes a questionnaire can be fill in the blanks, so they can write their own opinions and whatnot. The open-ended question is, let's say, for example, what would you recommend? Those kinds of questions. Are there any other things that McDonald's need to improve on? So you list down or you write the things that they are asking you for. Okay. Now, guidelines on implementing your questionnaire. Number one, introduce the questionnaire through a cover letter or through an interview. Let's say, for example, if you're doing a cover letter, make sure that the cover letter is first, and then below that is your questionnaire. Always introduce the purpose of the questionnaire, what's it for, and then when do you need it, so that the respondent will be able to send it back to you. If it is through an interview, let's say, for example, you were walking around and then you just you selected random strangers for your questionnaire, then you can um, explain to them the purpose of your questionnaire. Second one, keep the questionnaire as short as possible. So, like with the previous example, if you have three research questions, 15 questions would do. Don't overdo your questionnaires. Don't bore your respondents to death. Um, Third, ensure confidentiality. Always ensure that the anonymity of your respondents should be your top priority. In a way, it would create a sense of rapport and confidence between you and your respondent, so that the respondent will be able to trust you and send you the copy of your questionnaire right away. Fourthly, give enough time. Don't pressure them. Like, let's say, for example, um, you let's say you sent the questionnaire today, don't let them send it back to you the next day. Give them, let's say, 2 days to do your questionnaire. Okay. I think the longest that you can give them is maybe 3 days. That's the longest time. If they ask for consideration, let's say for example in a very special situation, then consider 5 days. So 3 to 5 days between those times. Number five, prepare the questionnaire and ensure that grammar is correct. Okay. Now, why is this important? Mainly because you are not there to defend your questionnaire. You need to understand that the questionnaire should be very, very simple to understand, and that it is very easy to comprehend. Every question should be very black and white, or very topic or information specific. Number six, always ask the respondent. Okay. Whenever they give you back the questionnaire, always thank the respondent and ensure that um, their identity will be under strict confidentiality. Okay, you don't, so that it won't give it will give them the impression that you won't be giving away their names and whatnots, or that other researchers will be able to um, ask them as their respondents. Okay. So those are general guidelines. Like I said, in the internet or in different books, there are maybe more than six or more than five, or maybe shorter than this one, depending on the guidelines or the style that they are doing. With this particular guideline, this is very general, so that you'll be able to implement your research instrument as concisely and efficiently as you can. So we already did what? Survey, we did interview and questionnaire. Now let's go to observation. With observation, there are actually 6 types of observation. We have participant observation, non-participant observation. We have what we call structured observation. We have also unstructured, and we have covert and overt observations. Now, what are the differences? Um, a non a participant observation allows the researcher to interact actively with the subjects. So also in certain cases it would influence the general outcome of the observation. With a non-participant observation type, it allows the researcher to observe the subjects without interacting with them and without influencing their behavior. Hence, the subjects do not know that they are being observed. And actually, with non-participant observation, this is usually employed by psychologists when observing animals or other people. With a participant observation, this is normally done when you are involved in a particular community, and therefore you need to, of course, do maybe short interactions with your subjects. Now, between structured and unstructured, the structured observation occurs when the researcher has a list of behaviors that he or she wants to observe. So, let's say, for example, this is still a structured observation is also a non-participant kind of observation, sort of, but there is a list, or what we call a checklist of behaviors that the researcher needs to observe or needs to get from the subjects. With unstructured observation, the researcher allows behaviors to emerge. Okay, these behaviors are then documented through an in-depth narrative account. So it doesn't matter what kind of behavior the subjects are displaying, as long as these particular behaviors are being observed and being documented in a video format, or probably using the researchers or observers field notes. Now, covert and overt, sorry. um, Covert observations This occur when the subjects are not aware that they are being observed. So it is also a non-participant type of observation, and necess- with this particular observation type, the subjects doesn't necessarily know that you're there or know that the observer is there observing them. So the observer kind of observe his or her subjects in a very vicarious manner. With overt observation, the subjects are aware that they are being observed. Okay, so sometimes with overt observation, the same with participant observation, um, it somehow influences the behavior that your subjects are showing you. Okay, so those are the types of observation. Guidelines on observing. Number one, develop an observation guide. Always have, let's say, a list with you so that you'll know what you are trying to understand, and you'll be fully guided on what you should do in your particular observation. Number two, decide on the type of observation that you're going to do. Is it going to be a participant type of observation or non-participant? Is it structured or not? Is it covert or overt? It depends on what your research study needs and what you think is appropriate for that particular research study. Number four, use a recording device when appropriate. Okay, like I said, with the interview, if it's a participant type of observation, ask or inform your subjects at least that you are documenting or recording. If it is non-participant type, then you don't need to tell them that you're recording, actually. Also, always take notes. What if, let's say, for example, in the middle of recording, excuse me, the battery of your recording device ran out, and therefore rendering you almost helpless. I say almost helpless mainly because you need to document still, so you take notes. 6. Never attempt to influence behavior of subjects. Okay, this is one rule that um, an observer needs to follow and must follow. Let's say, for example, with a very non-participant type of observation, you don't need to influence, or actually you don't have to, or you should never influence the subjects so that they will not display certain behaviors that your research study doesn't need. With a very participant type of research observation, you can interact with your subjects as long as you don't influence them, so that you can see certain behaviors or certain things, certain informations that you need for your research study. Um, if that's the case, if you influence your subjects to show them certain information or certain behavior that you're actually looking for, that particular observation is actually very biased, and it is um, unreliable. Lastly, always observe ethics. So let's say, for example, if you're immersed in a, sorry, did I say emerge? Oh my God. Let's say, for example, if you are observing a particular community, and and you need to interact to them from time to time. And let's say, for example, they are alienated or bewildered with how you dress. Of course, you need to dress like them so that so that it will not influence the behavior of your subjects. They will treat you as part of the community mainly because you dress like them, you eat with them, you eat like them, and you make it so that it doesn't seem to bother sorry, it doesn't seem to bother your research subjects. Okay, wow, I've been doing a lot of errors there. Whew. Okay, so again, these are general guidelines for observation. Okay, again, 6 types of observation. We have the participant, non-participant, we have structured, unstructured, we have covert and overt type of observation. Lastly, experimentation. Now, experimentation is a procedure undertaken scientifically and
Oh my god! Wow!
oh my god, systematically. Oh my god.
Oh my god! Wow!
Scientifically and systematically. Okay. This is to make a discovery and to test a hypothesis. Okay. Now, an experiment can be performed in a laboratory or in a natural setting. Okay. Now, this is, let's say, this is the process of experimentation. Number one, make observations first. These particular steps, when you're trying to make an observation, before you do an experiment, you should observe the variables. Okay. Now, after observing the variables, you need to develop a hypothesis. Let's say, for example, the variables are behaving in such a way. What if, for example, your hypothesis is if you disturb that particular behavior, there will be a different behavior, or it will disturb their, let's say, um, interaction or behavior to one another. So that's your hypothesis. You develop that. And then you design the experiment. What kind of experiment are you going to do? Next, you conduct the experiment and then analyze the results. Then 6, decide on whether to accept or reject the hypothesis based on the results. Okay, so that is a general scientific process or process of experimentation. Now, general guidelines to experimentation. Number 1, always coordinate with a supervisor. May it be your teacher, or if you are, let's say, you already graduated and you are already working, always consult your immediate supervisor or immediate chairperson or laboratory technician if you're working in a laboratory. Second, make yourself present and accessible. Okay? Whenever you're doing an experiment, always be there. Always be on time. Always do it on your own. Don't let others do it for you. Okay? Number 3, maintain a relaxed and professional atmosphere. Pleasure and work don't mix. So if, let's say, for example, experimentation is, let's say, for you it's fun, then you should not mix it with the kind of work that you're doing. Mainly because you need to be very professional about it. You need to be very serious with experiments, okay, or when you're doing your experiment. Now, if you're in a lab, clean the experiment venue before and after. Okay, this is very important, mainly because your laboratory technician will thank you for this because you're not doing a very messy job. Also, when you are cleaning the experiment venue, it makes the variables behave in such a way that they are controlled. Okay, we might not know. What if, for example, a dirty venue will result to a different behavior from your variable? Those kinds of things. Number 5, let's say you need participants. Okay, if you need a participant or participants, let them fill out an informed consent that you'll be doing experimentations to them. And let's say you'll be compensating them for their time and their inconvenience. Number 6, ensure the confidentiality of the experiment, whether it may be with or without a participant or participants for that matter. Ensure confidentiality. We don't want it to happen like in China, di ba? The birthplace of coronavirus. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. We don't know for sure where coronavirus actually started, so We don't know, or we cannot conclude for sure if it's in China. Okay, so that's the last research instrument that we'll be talking about, experimentation. Again, there are 5: survey. Let's see if I get this right: survey, interview, questionnaire, observation, and experimentation. Okay, so that was it. Lyceans, hope you had a great time. I hope I was able to entertain you before we went on to the nitty gritty part of the lesson. And regarding your monthly long test, yes, monthly long test. Of course, I'll be rechecking them. What do you think? I trust Quipper, but I don't trust the system that well. So, as a quick reminder, I am actually at the moment, I am actually counter checking your monthly long test. So rest assured, whenever I'm doing a counter check, either I'll be adding points to some of you or I'll be removing points to some of you. Okay. Now the monthly long test is 45 items. If you're able to figure that out, good job. Kudos to you. If you were not able to figure that out, as someone who did, okay, because I'm receiving this a lot of questions about why is it 45. We only answered 35. I mean, yeah, I know. I designed it, and so I um I am actually expecting those things. Anyway, hope you like this lesson in EAPP, and I hope that you are safe and always make yourself proud. Ciao.